be here, Will.
So tell us a little bit about Laurie Marshall.
I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was 8 years old and found joy in playing creatively with children. And I got certified to teach from Antioch College and went into combining art and teaching together, became an art teacher, got a master's degree in art and education, which I really wanted to get a master's degree in community art, but there was no such thing at that time. And I'm passionate about empowering young people to embrace their creativity and their voice, and to know their voice is important, along with all other humans. So I facilitated collaborative art experiences that are peace building, inspired by nature, by the mutualism that we're surrounded by.
What problems do you see with our society today?
Do you have 10 years? Very, very simply, in a nutshell, we have lost our village. And we, for thousands of years, had a village that helped share stories together, danced together, sang together, shared food together, took care of the children and the elders together, and knew each other's business and cared about each other. And we're very isolated now.
And we were actually beginning to become isolated even before COVID, don't you think?
Yes, and COVID's done an interesting thing, which is, for the first time in 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, families have been together. And we're not very practiced at how to do that. And creativity and storytelling is a very important tool for how to do that during COVID times, as well as with climate change. Our young people are going to be facing numerous disruptions from disasters over and over. So in order to not be depleted, we need connection, and the children need connection. And in order to cope, we need creativity for innovation.
Okay, what about us old guys that we can't have our children close to us, let alone our grandchildren or great grandchildren? How do we get that sense of community during COVID?
Well, again, I think we have to be creative. We can use our creativity. And for example, I've been making books for my grandson, books about how long it's going to take for me to see him, doing countdowns of the days, and books where I take a little image of him and put him all over my house and make an adventures so that he sees that we play together, even though we're not in the same room together. So creativity is key to make songs, to make stories, to make videos for our grandchildren.
Are you doing that through Zoom, getting close to it?
Yes. And Facebook.
How old is your grandson?
I have a 3-year-old and a 2-month-old.
Okay, probably more interaction with the 3-year-old.
Yes, I get to see that the 2-month-old's eyes are open now. But it is a real issue, and to make it a priority to keep in touch and to play with each other and tell stories, it's just so important.
Okay. I appreciate that, and I think that's very important for us. From my perspective, children are largely overlooked today. When you talk with some of the experts about the subconscious mind and how much negative is given to the kids, I think that's an important issue for us to deal with, to learn how to instill positive values rather than the negative in our children. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And one of my missions is to honor the gifts that children come in with. That's why I made my book, The Flood of Kindness, which was written by Deontay Webster. I don't know if you can see that very good.
Yes, I can see it.
Here's Deontay when he was 8, and he wrote this story about Hurricane Katrina when his 3rd grade teacher in Indiana asked him to write a story about historical fiction. And he thought about what would be the hardest thing in a flood, and it would be to lose his best friend. And he wrote the story, and it was so moving and powerful. I thought it was real. I thought he had really known this little girl that he called Jessica Park, and he had made her up. And he thought about in these big weather events, in Hurricane Katrina, to lose your best friend would be the most heartbreaking thing. And he imagined her gone. And then in the story, he grieves. And in the power of grieving, a magic rose emerges. Can you see the magic rose?
Yes, I see that. And you did the artwork for the book.
I did the artwork, and I helped him through over a 6-year period put his story that he wrote in 15 minutes into a book. And the rose disappears because there's not enough kindness in New Orleans. There's great anger and turmoil. And one night the workers find Jessica's locket, and they all grieve together. And that ability to grieve together caused kindness to fill New Orleans. And I think this is such a powerful story for now, because if we don't grieve and turn our grief into something beautiful and collective, it's going to turn into mob mentality.
Okay. Now, Laurie, did I understand you to say that he was 8 years old when he wrote it initially?
Yes.
And he was living in Indiana? And
yes.
Was he a student in one of your classes?
No, actually, I met his grandmother, Jacqueline Webster, in 1964 at a Quaker work camp in Richmond, Indiana. And we've known each other for 56 years. And I met her daughter, Aisha. And I met Deontay when I met Deontay when he was 5. So we began to co-create together, and Aisha, his mom, sent me his story, and I was so moved by it that it changed my life to dedicate 6 years to illustrating it and producing the book with him. And he's now going to college. Next year he'll go to college.
It is amazing what you can do if you just can look at what seemingly is a small thing.
What is a small thing?
I said, no, what is seemingly a small thing? When you look at something that is seemingly small, and yet when you take it and use it as a seed to let it grow, that it can become something that can really help a lot of people.
Yes, and his story has been performed as a play in Virginia, and he came down and got to see the play. And his story has been sent to children in Texas and in Puerto Rico for children who have experienced big weather events, and it's been shared in California with children who are experiencing the fires. And many times the children say, maybe I could write a book. Seeing
Isn't that great?
Deontay's book.
Okay, so what we're facing now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, that's It's not just isolated as a hurricane in one part of the country or a big fire in another part of the country. It's affecting our entire world.
Yes.
Okay, so that's got to have a bigger impact today on our children. So what do we need to do besides get close to our children, tell stories, laugh as much as we can, sing as much as we can with the children, if not in person with something like Zoom? What else do we need to be doing, Laurie?
We need to be allocating resources. If we allocated 1% of our military budget to making sure every school had plexiglass and had enough space and enough teachers, we could fund what children need. We're not prioritizing the needs of the children in our budget. The schools need billions of dollars to make it feasible for children to be in person, and to use the model of schools that are doing that is so important. So talking to our legislators about how important it is to allocate real funds for the ability to do in-person learning is very important. Please speak to your representative about that.
Okay, so when you're talking about plexiglass in the school, you're talking about setting up barriers to protect the child from the disease and yet be in the classroom.
Right.
Okay, so we need larger space to have the social distancing. I'm sorry?
Yes. And more teachers, and we need to pay our teachers $120,000 a year. They are such essential professionals. That should be the starting salary. They, all these high-tech jobs are, they're great. However, the fact that we so undervalue our children, that we so underpay our teachers is just criminal, and it's has a terrible effect.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is instead of leaving the most important tasks for people that have a compassion and are willing to work for free or almost,
Yes.
we should be paying them a living wage so that they can give our children the attention that they need.
Yes, and teachers are just dropping like flies in the demands of COVID. They're saying that by November, they feel like it's June. They're so exhausted. And we need many more adults. We need a much bigger village with the children. And also, we need to give the children real work to do in addressing the issues of our times, in addressing COVID, in addressing climate change, in addressing racial inequity. If the children have fresh ideas and vision and hope, and I believe we should treat all children as if they're graduate students. That model works for kindergartners, to keep listening about what is the fascination that this child brings to the planet, and feeding those fascinations and hooking them up with experts to create real new knowledge and real solutions to real problems.
I read a report the other day. I think the actual experiment was done in 1962, so it's been a while. But a professor came up with a special, quote unquote, special IQ test. Really, it was just a standard IQ test, but they gave it to several classes of children, and then they randomly picked a few kids from each class and told the teachers that this test was identifying the potential of great advancement in IQ improvement in these special kids. They weren't special kids. They were just the normal child in the classroom. The teachers believed that they were special, and over a 2-year period, they did have marvelous increases in their IQ.
That's heartbreaking.
How do we get teachers to understand the potential of every child that's coming into their class?
I wrote another book, which I can't hold up right here, that's called Beating the Odds Now: 10 Steps for Teachers to Meet the Standards and Still Love What You Do. And this book begins, the first step is to understand the spark of every child, and to be always asking every child, what brings you joy? What makes you feel useful? What problem do you want to solve? And when we approach every child with that inquiry, then their gifts unfold. I was fortunate to be a gifted and talented teacher for Rappahannock County High School, or school system in rural Virginia, and studied with Joseph Renzulli at University of Connecticut. And at that time, the federal government was funding 5% of the school to be gifted, money for gifted program. And Renzulli made this brilliant program, which was any child in the school could apply to make a proposal to make a real product for a real audience that had a real impact, that came out of their real interest. So 5% of the school was the number of slots that they had. And any kid could make a proposal. And if the proposal was accepted, they could work as long as they wanted to complete their project, and then their slot would be available. So it was not based on IQ. It was not based on any external adult saying you're gifted. It was, who wants to do something? It just was brilliant. I love that. And I want it for all the kids, because we can't waste their time. We are looking at a tipping point. If the temperature of our planet goes up 2 degrees, the methane in the Arctic and the North is going to rise up and bubble out into the atmosphere and potentially make our planet uninhabitable. This is what the science says. We need the kids to help us by our side, to address solutions, and use nature as the model, to use the concepts of biomimicry to study how nature produces energy without any toxic result in photosynthesis. And there are people that are working on dye-sensitive cells as a source for energy.
Laurie, when I was in grade school, the teacher had set up, and I'm not sure just exactly how they set it up, but anyway, I ended up being the movie director, and we had the kids that were participating in the movie. They were with me in the coat closet, and I would give them instructions and send them out to the room, and they would do their performance. And I think I was doing pretty well in the first few scenes, and then either we ran out of time or the teacher got bored or whatever, but she shut me down in such a way that I never, ever did anything else with any kind of creative entertainment. I mean, as I look back on it now, understanding the power that individuals have and what children can do, I might have been the guy that produced Star Wars.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing this show now, because here you are. You could very easily be doing something else besides what you're doing at this very minute. So good for you for returning to this drive you have to tell stories, get stories out there. Good for you.
Okay, one other thing that I wanted to talk about when you're talking about the children and the creativity of the children, and how the teachers need to recognize it. What do you suggest we can do for the parents of the children, so that instead of having so many thousands of children abused every year, and I've forgotten the exact statistics, but I think it's something like 679,000 cases of child abuse reported every year, and if you think those numbers are the reported ones, how many additional children are being abused sexually, physically, emotionally, neglect, all of those things. What can we do to help the parents understand that when they have that child, they have God's greatest creation that has such tremendous potential? How do we help the parents?
Again, we need the village. We need to know who our neighbors are, and we need to have a society that makes children and families a priority, which ours does not. It makes earning money a priority. And you know, the word economy means to make home. And we do not make it easy for people to make homes right now. And we haven't ever since the Industrial Revolution. So we're looking at this time as the birth of a truly regenerative economy and an inclusive democracy. We've never had those two things. We've had an extractive economy where we take things out of the earth and we leave the earth poisoned. And we have not had an inclusive democracy. We're giving birth to this, and it's very painful, I think, how if we have a regenerative economy, we give maternal and paternal leave for a year, like they do in Sweden. We make it possible for people to stay home with their children if they want, or to have really high quality, well-paid daycare. And we keep supporting the parents and letting them know that they're, as you said, they're doing the most important job on earth, and that getting trained in emotional intelligence and nonviolent communication is a essential part of our education system. I work with Paul Chappelle, who has a program of peace literacy that grew out of his time as the child of a military man. And he spent 6 years in the military as a captain in Iraq. And he's applying what he learned in the military to wage peace, to treat all people with respect, to leave no one behind, to give people the benefit of the doubt, which are all things that are trained in the Army to do with your battalion. And he says, 1,000 years ago, we used to think that you have to sacrifice a person in order for the crops to grow. And we didn't think anyone needed to know how to read. Now, we know that there is no need to sacrifice people in order for the crops to grow. And we assume that everyone should learn how to read. And what's necessary for the species to survive is to become trained in peace literacy. And peace literacy includes understanding that an aggression is a distress response, and getting trained in recognizing your own triggers and remaining calm when you hear other people being triggered, and moving from out of curiosity instead of out of defense and protectiveness. And it is hard. I've been working on this for 71 years and I still don't get it. However, I have resources and support and stories that it's possible to have a peaceful response in a high stress, violent situation. We don't have very many stories that this is possible. Most all of our media that the kids get fed, force is the thing that wins the day. Even Wonder Woman, who said she was acting out of love, used force to defeat the enemy. And to imagine that there is a way of connecting to the enemy and to transform fear and hatred into love and connection. That's what Jesus was about. And Jesus said, the children shall lead them. And if we pay attention to that love and innocence and embrace that children have, and curiosity, and fiercely preserve that, instead of making them be like everyone else, having faith that they want to learn, and having faith that they come in with gifts, is very important.
Laurie, great interview. Thank you so much for your input. The only thing that you forgot to mention was that sometimes the best storytellers are old guys.
We need our elders. We need our elder men and we need our elder women. We need our grandfathers and our grandmothers.
Go. I think it's the Asian culture that has a little more respect for the older people, and I think that's something that we've lost in our country, and it means more to me now since well, anyway, I'm past 40.
Well, I'm proud to say I'm 71, and I know there's a thing for women to not to lie about their age, and the fact that I've had the privilege of going around the sun 71 times is a great blessing, and I'm very privileged.
Well, from my perspective, you're just a kid, Laurie.
Great.
I've been around for 5 years longer.
Well, good for you.
Anyway, it's been great having you on the program. You've been listening to Real Hope with W.L. Laney and my guest, Laurie Marshall. Until this time tomorrow, thank you for being with us. Laurie, thank you for being on the